up, everybody? It's Goddess Z, and I'm here with another podcast episode on holistic and spiritual as fuck. What's up? Welcome back, fam. If you are tuning in again, I appreciate you guys so much. It's the first solo episode of the year of 2026. So, welcome back. And if this is your first time hopping on this podcast, you're definitely in the right place if you're into topics such as how to connect with your ancestors, how to activate divine feminine codes, metaphysics, esoteric wisdom. I mean, we go in, myself and my guests and this podcast airs every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On the first and third Fridays of the month, I have a guest coming in sharing their wisdom and their downloads and transmissions. And then on the second and the fourth Fridays of the month, I come in sharing my downloads and transmissions for the month. So that is what today is going to be about. Today is actually going to be episode 70, meditation as ancestral technology. And I'm trying to figure out why we haven't done this episode before. Okay, so just definitely stick around all the way to the end because if you know me, I drops jewels, I drops gems, I drops loads and loads of knowledge. Okay, but I want to get some business out of the way first because we're at the top of the new year. And first and foremost, you can find me all over social media at Holistic and Spiritual AF. That's and spelled out. I'm everywhere. Just, Google it and you can find me. Also, I have a class coming up on Wednesday, January the 21st at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is the Science versus Spirituality Masterclass. So definitely tune in, check out the website as well. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about is going to kind of merge and be like a gateway into that. So if this episode resonates with you, definitely check that out. I'll have all this information down in the description. And of course, you can go to my website if you're into certain books, spiritual consultations. If something resonates with you, then definitely check me out over there as well. Okay. So, with that being said, I hope everybody has been taking care of themselves, mind, body, and spirit, because that's what it's all about. I always say that because if either one of those things are out of balance, then we are out of balance. Okay. And so that's why I wanted to come in this year. My ancestors nudged me, and I was like, what are we talking about, right? And it's like, let's talk about meditation because that's something that I'm going to be incorporating a lot more of in the community. So definitely, I already have meditations up on YouTube, like in the live section. You can also go to my website as well. I have some longer, deeper meditations there. But if you're into something to try to, cultivate a meditation practice, which is I'm always going to suggest that, then definitely check me out on Insight Timer as well. So, like I said, my website has all that information, and you'll be able to find me in certain places, and how it resonates with you. But today, I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's topic, which is episode 70. Can you believe it? Wow. Like we are just growing. Like when I see that, I'll be like, oh my goodness, like 70 episodes. That's really something, And if you know anything about me, I'm a big time ancestor girly, heavily guided and protected by my ancestors. And it was actually their guidance and suggestion to start this podcast back in 2022. So now that it's 2026, and to see that we're at episode 70, that like really makes my heart smile. As much people as are getting help by it as well, and how much it has grown and expanded into so many different things beyond that, the books, the classes, the consultations. Like, really, I had no idea what direction we were going into, but the connections that I've been able to make too with the guests on the podcast. So it's really just transcended into something just absolutely I couldn't even tell you that it was going to be all this. Okay, so that's why my mind is blown, like how much my ancestors was on point as usual. Okay. So first and foremost, before we jump into this episode, I'm going to do something a little different that I usually don't do, which is I want us to just stop wherever you are and just take a deep breath. Really just kind of tune in to your body and the present moment and where we are right now. So let's just take a pause right here and then breathe in deeply through your nose and exhale through your nose or your mouth, whichever feels resonant with you, and just kind of release, any tension, any stress, anything that, you had going on in your mind that was stressing you out, any anxiety. Just go ahead and let that go. And hopefully you feel a little bit more like, in tune with what's happening with you and in your body, okay? And so that's just like a little tiny precursor of how powerful meditation can be and how powerful the breath is, okay? So today I want to talk about meditation as ancestral technology because, like I said, everything that I do is, heavily guided by my ancestors. And just check out some of my past, particularly my earlier episodes where I go into my journey as well as my relationship with my ancestors. And of course, always come to a class. All right. So, what is meditation really? All right. Let's jump into that first because I think a lot of times we get these definitions from a Western perspective, and everything that I do is always coming from an Afro-Indigenous perspective. And when I say Afro-Indigenous, I'm talking about of the African diaspora. So I'm talking about us as Native Indigenous Americans over here. I'm also talking about those of us who are Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latina, things that are coming from the African diaspora. All right. So that's what I mean by Afro-Indigenous. And I know that that term has gotten a lot convoluted lately because a lot of people are understanding and waking up to the fact that not all of us came and our ancestors were brought over here to the Americas as enslaved Africans. Okay. Now, my particular story is my mom's side is definitely Native American. Okay. That can be traced back on both of my great grandparents' sides as Cherokee. And so we know that. And I knew that as a little girl. But of course, history has told us something different. Now, my dad is Caribbean. So my dad's side, his grandfather, either grandfather or great grandfather, was brought over from Nigeria. So I do know that on that side, that connects me to my African side. But on my mom's side, all we ever knew was be a Native American. So for me, I like to describe myself as Afro-American. I don't like to put labels on things. I know that I'm indigenous on both sides. And so when I say Afro-Indigenous, that's what I'm speaking of. So I wanted to go ahead and get that clear just in case some people were kind of curious as to what the heck is Afro-Indigenous. All right. But I want to talk about meditation and what it really is. Because, like I said, a lot of times we get these Western terms and we internalize them as our own, and they really are not ours. And a lot of times what it is new age perspectives are Europeans trying to make sense of our technology, our ancestral wisdom that's already stored in our DNA. But because a lot of us have been so far removed from that, we haven't exactly had people in our family that was actually teaching us and walking us along the ancient ways. We just kind of grab a hold and assimilate like a chameleon to what resonates, what's available, honestly, just what's available. So the Western definition is going to be look at meditation like a mental exercise, like a tool to quiet thoughts, a way to reduce stress and anxiety, something that you do for 5 or 10 minutes, something that's usually disconnected from lineage, land, or spirit, very important. And it's usually kind of framed as a clear your mind, focus on your breath, relax, almost similar to what we started when I just started this podcast episode, but it's deeper than that. Okay. So, in this framework on the Western side of things, the mind is centered, the body is secondary, the spirit is optional completely, and ancestors are rarely mentioned. Okay. Culture and lineage are removed. Okay. And so that's the danger of if you're taking it from that perspective. And don't get me wrong, because there is definitely some benefits to quieting the mind, tuning into the breath, quieting your thoughts, using mental exercises, coming up with practices for 5 to 10 minutes. So it definitely has its benefits. And actually, that's a lot of what you're going to find on my insight timer because I truly believe a person is a practice. You know what I'm saying? You can't just jump into being an expert and into trance mode when you haven't even gotten used to being quiet and tuning in with your body in the day. So you got to start somewhere and where you are. So the Western idea and perspective of meditation, which is really pulling from indigenous cultures, okay, because a lot of that is not native to their culture and their ancestry. So they have to pull something from these indigenous cultures in order to be able to have some sort of understanding. So that's what they get out of it, something that's going to calm me down. And, like I said, it is completely disconnected from spirit, ancestors, lineage, and that's because it does not originate from them. Okay. And so, not to discount, like I said, those practices because they are very beneficial. It's very beneficial to be able to calm your mind and be quiet and kind of tune into your body. And for me and my journey, a lot of that is how I started. That's exactly how I started. And that journey took me somewhere else. Okay. So I wanted to give that definition of the Western New Age definition definition of meditation. And then I wanted to kind of bring it back to an Afro-Indigenous perspective and how our ancestors actually looked at meditation, because it's very important to also understand that before there was an English word for meditation, our ancestors was doing this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Nobody had to really call it anything. It just was a way of life. It's just the way that things were and how they did things and how they moved. Everything that they did was very highly connected to spirit, connected to nature, connected to the cosmos, connected to ancestry, reverence for the ones that came before, the elders, and all of those things. So everything was this whole mind, body, spirit integration. It was all encompassing of the total well being and the holistic approach of living. Okay. We got pulled away from that when colonization came in, and I think everybody knows the rest of the story. Okay. So that's what this episode is about as well. It's allowing us to be able to reclaim and remember what's already inside of our DNA, so our ancestral wisdom is still there. So, meditation from an Afro Indigenous perspective, um, what our ancestors did was, it was African cosmologies, indigenous American traditions, Afro-Caribbean practices, all understood something deeply aligned, that stillness is how we listen. So that's why I said there's nothing wrong with quieting the mind, because you can't hear shit if you don't quiet the mind. Okay. So they understood that stillness, though, if you wanted to get deeper, if you wanted to go in more, hear more, then you had to get still. And this is how we listen. Okay. So in African traditions, meditation showed up as ritual silence. Okay. It showed up as trance. It showed up as breath. And it also showed up as drumming in altered states. Now, I don't know if drumming is extremely powerful for me. And I remember when I went on my journey and I started tapping into traditional African spirituality, I mean, I went into trance like ASAP off the drums. Why? Because my soul, my spirit, my DNA remembered that, and it spoke to me. And there's a reason that at a certain point over here in the Americas, that drumming was deemed illegal, because it was doing stuff to people that they couldn't explain, because it was activating certain things inside of their DNA, as well as a form of communication based on their culture and particular rituals. Okay. So, drumming into altered states. In Native American and American Indian traditions, meditation lived in vision quest, sitting with the land, fasting and listening, dream incubation. And Afro-Caribbean traditions, especially in Haitian voodoo, Cuban Lakumi, and New Orleans spiritual systems or hoodoo, meditation appeared as altar sitting, candle gazing, prayer and stillness, spirit possession and preparation. That's going to be much more on the hoodoo side, as well as voodoo and Ifa and all of that too. So the important thing to think about here is that meditation and ancestral practices was, stillness was kind of the beginning. Okay. Stillness was like, you got to get quiet first, because that's how you hear, and you can really tune in. But it involved some other things. It involved drumming, it involved ritual, it involved ceremony, it involved sitting with nature and connecting with those energies. It involved invoking certain types of ancestors or deities and possession. Okay. So, as you can see, there's a huge difference in between Western meditation as well as what our ancestors were doing. And the odd thing about that is we know about Western meditation. Like, I could tell everybody to take a deep breath and tune into your body and things like that. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. But when I start talking about these Afro-Indigenous perspectives, it's like, huh, interesting. Because the way that it's set up now in the Western society has you thinking, it'll have you thinking that people of Afro-Indigenous ancestry didn't meditate. They did. That's my whole point. They just didn't call it meditation. And that's where sometimes the confusion comes. And that's what we're here to kind of debunk right now. Okay. So just wanted to give that breakdown, because I always like to, talk about what it is that we're talking about before we jump into it. Okay. And this episode is not going to be as long as the others, because, like I said, this kind of segues into the class that we're going to be having, where we're going to really go deep, because that's like a hour and a half, 2 hour class. And so definitely, show up to that if this is resonating with you, because we're going to really get deep in behind closed doors. That's how I do. All right. So the next part I want to talk about is nervous system regulation across Afro-Indigenous traditions. So we're hearing a lot about that nervous system regulation. I love the fact that we are starting to tune into healing. Okay, because that is definitely a part of our a huge part of us being able to connect with our ancestors and really start to reclaim and remember and activate those codes is because healing is going to be so much. We need that, particularly in indigenous cultures, because we've dealt with so much trauma and our ancestors have as well over the last 400 years. And so a lot of that's in our DNA too. So the fact that we're actually talking about things that, like my grandmother, if I said nervous system regulation to her, she would be like, "What?" Like, they were in survival mode. They were doing what they had to do to make sure that we got here to this place, okay? And so the way that I see it is that we now have a duty. They went through the bulk of the worst part in order for us to be able to have options today, in order for us to be able to gentle parent and things like that. So nervous system regulation is something that's being thrown around a lot on social media. It's very interesting. I'm watching it, but I want to talk about it from an Afro-Indigenous perspective. So, across the indigenous traditions, a dysregulated body cannot safely hold spirit. Ooh, we know that. Me being somebody who is connected to my ancestors, who speaks with them telepathically, who channels, who's a medium, let me tell you something. My ancestors are not coming through your nervous anxiety. You got a whole bunch of stuff on your mind, body, you can't quiet, you got scattered thoughts, that's not a clear channel. Okay, simple as that. Like I said, you got to think about old school TVs and things before cable, or was a thing. And if the channel was distorted, it have all of this stuff and you can't hear nothing, you could barely see the picture and the signal isn't coming through clearly. Okay, and that's what we're talking about here by a dysregulated nervous system. And so, if you're always in fight or flight mode, if you're always in survival, if you are from one minute to the next, then spirit is not really trying to communicate with you because nothing's really getting through. And if it does, you won't really be able to tell what's what. Okay, so our indigenous ancestors knew that a dysregulated body cannot safely hold spirit, because you got to remember, you're holding spirit. We're dealing with spirits and connecting with ancestors. There's high vibratory ones and there's low vibratory ones. So you don't want to be resonating with a dysregulated nervous system in a lower frequency where you're attracting lower frequency spirits. Period. Like I tried to come up with another way to say that to make it sound less scary, but let's just keep it real, okay? So that's why our ancestors work with breath. All right. So breath is going to be across the board. They work with rhythm. They to get you in a certain mindset and a certain frequency and a certain vibration. Okay. So they work with repetition, doing things over and over and over, because that'll break a pattern. Okay. Ritual posture. Okay. And silence. Okay. And I got certified as a qigong instructor a while back, and I used to do a lot of qigong at the park and sometimes the beach. And what I loved about it is because at the time my mind was so busy. I was one of those type of people that couldn't sit there and do that, quiet meditation. So I had to do movement meditation. And what I loved about it is it required movement, breath, and focus on like three things: your stance, your posture, your movement, and your breath. And then it was the repetition of it. And so I would be doing these different moves, and no matter what I had on my mind, all of a sudden, zonk, I would be in the flow and the rhythm of what it is that I was doing. Okay, so that repetition matters, the breath matters, having something to focus on to get you outside of this kind of 3D mentality and reality is very beneficial. So our ancestors knew that. All right. Indigenous American traditions also understood that before vision quests, in other words, visualization, seeing things, and this could be either in the dream state or awakened state. That's the thing too. We're not talking about the dream state here. We're talking about having visualizations and visions while you're awake, because when you're in the dream state, that's a whole nother ball game. You're not necessarily in control then. So the body was prepared. So that makes total sense. Like you got to understand, you're just not waltzing through and touring through the spirit realm all messy and like discombobulated and bringing all your 3D experience into higher realms of existence. So there were certain things that had to be done. Shamans knew this. The elders knew this. The body has to be prepared before ceremonies. The nervous system was grounded. Okay, so you also have to be grounded, before you take flight into these different realities. All right. So meditation is not passive. That's also very important. And with our ancestral healing technology, it's not passive, honey. You getting prepared to do some major stuff. All right. That's why I said stick around, follow me. I don't care if you're following me on social media or check out my website, but know that we are going to be going somewhere much deeper with the meditation. All right. And so I'm going to have a private group. This is coming up. I'm preparing this now. And so that's why I said, if you're interested, if you're just starting out, go ahead and check out some of that stuff that's on YouTube. Check out the Insight Timer. Start to kind of quiet your body, get your nervous system regulated. Because as I have these different tiers and levels of meditation, we're going to be going deeper. All right. This is something that my ancestors is calling me to do as well. But in order to do that, everybody can't come. You cannot come with all of this. There's levels to it. Let me put it that way. Okay. So there's layers and there's levels to it. So not everybody's going to be able to start out in some of the stuff that we're doing. All right. It doesn't mean that you'll never be able to get there. It just means that you're gonna have to work yourself on up there. You're gonna have some repetition, some discipline, some practice. You're gonna have to put in the work. And so it's most likely not even gonna be a large group. I already know how this goes. All right. But definitely keep up with me because I'm gonna be rolling that information out probably within the next 2 to 3 months. All right. So meditation is not passive, y'all. It's preparation. And this is something that I'm going through actively. All right. My ancestors told me about a year and a half ago, they wanted me to start getting back into meditation and taking it to the people. And I was like, what? I was like, I started out like over 20 years ago on meditation. I'm like, I felt like offended by it. I had no idea. Let me just say that the journey that I have taken is has taken me deeper into my spiritual practices, and I'm having experiences that I can't describe to you. I can only describe them to you in closed containers, and I can only describe them to you based on you haven't reached a certain level and frequency based on your own practice. But I had no idea it was this deep, y'all. That's all I gotta say. So don't sleep on it. All right. You got one side of it, Western side. That's why I said they only know so much. We had these things already in our DNA. Our ancestors was already doing it. And so there's much more to meditation. All right. It's a preparation. All right. And it only happens when the body feels safe. The intuition begins to open. When the intuition opens, guess what? Now the ancestors speak. All right. Now the spirit guides speak, because now you can hear. So there's a preparation that needs to be done in order to get you to a certain level where you are now communicating with the spirit realm. And this is going to be different than your everyday telepathic communication for those of you who have that with their ancestors, okay? Because I could do that now, like throughout the day, but it's a different type of experience when I'm setting aside the time in the day to have this ritual practice that I do with meditation, and there's different variations of it and depths of it, and the experiences that I have with it. Okay. So just know that. Now let's move on to meditation as a portal across worlds. I think it's perfect. We talked about the ancestors speaking. We talked about regulating the nervous system and how we get to that place. Now we're going to talk about meditation as portal across worlds. Now this is what I was talking about going deeper into. We started from breath. That's preparation. Let's calm the mind. Let's, get ready for, some sort of nervous system regulation. Now we're still, we're quiet. Now the ancestors are speaking. Now we're talking about meditation as a portal. All right. Now we done jumped into something totally different than 5 minute daily meditation. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, don't stop that either, because sometimes I have to get it in when I can get it in. But in Afro-Indigenous cosmologies, they never saw consciousness as flat. All right, there's layers, there's realms. All right, there's worlds overlapping this one. And yeah, let me break that down a little bit because I realize that people may be listening that this is new to them. So this reality that we're experiencing right now is just one of many, many, many. This is the third density. Third dimensional reality. You may have heard a lot of people talking about 4D, 5D. There's all sorts of different dimensions overlapping, okay? In order for our ancestors to be somewhere, but we can't see them, but we can hear them, they're in another dimension and another reality, okay? So there's many different consciousnesses that we can access, but we have to be in a certain state in order to do it. And I mean like certain state of consciousness in order to be able to do it. Just like when we go to sleep. When we go to sleep, we dream. What happens? The soul leaves the body, the spirit leaves the body, and our body is there physically, but we're having dreams, we're traveling, we're doing things, and then we come back to the body when it's time to wake up. So it's similar, all right? And then a lot of times when we're going to these places in our dreams, we're going to different places. So there's many, many, many different types of realities based on states of consciousness, okay? Layers, there's realms, and there's worlds overlapping, all right? Now, I'm not going to get too deep in on this podcast. Like I said, check out the class because we're going to go deeper into that. So, ancestral practices taught that ritual stillness and trances are technologies for crossing worlds without leaving the body. And that's very, very important. Indigenous African traditions understood meditation as initiation training, preparation for to hold spiritual power responsibly. Whew, that's a mouthful right there. And I'm not even going to go too much further into that because that right there is a whole class in itself. All right. But the bottom line is meditation is powerful, y'all. And this is why you'll hear me saying things like, oh, even 5 minutes a day is good because it starts to take you on a journey that takes you out of this world, literally. All right. Don't sleep on it. And I think that a lot of times people think, oh, meditation is boring or, oh, I can't do that. No, child, please. Like, let me tell you something. That's why I said stick around because we're going to be doing some amazing things over inside of my meditation group. All right. And I can't wait for people to start having their experiences so that people understand that this is real. And I also understood that a lot of times what people are saying and experiencing on social media is not real. That's all I gotta say. Like some people ain't doing this work and they're just saying that they are. And they're making it seem like this is a microwave quick fix and that you can get this too. Like, no, you got to put some ashe into it. Cause like I just said, they're not gonna just be opening up the portal so that any and everybody can come in and take a look. Like, there's a certain level of initiation and training that has to be done that your ancestors will do for you. Okay. Native American traditions mirror this as well. Elders retreat into silence, seekers go alone into nature, visions are received and not forced. And some people may be doing this without even knowing why, right? They're just feeling called to be alone. They're being called to go out in nature. I get that all the time. Visions are probably being received now, but they're being received in fragments. If you start your meditation practice and grow it and stay continuous with it and treat it like a ritual, then you will expand that. All right. So just know that. Afro Caribbean traditions also reflected the truth that stillness before possession, quiet before spirit arrival, and grounding before elevation. So, meditation is the doorway, not the destination. So, like I said before, I telepathically speak with my ancestors all day long. But when I'm trying to get some information about something or I need to receive something from them, then I have to take the time to take that seriously and treat that differently than my regular guidance throughout the day. And I know and I understand that, and I'm learning even more now. So meditation is the doorway, not the destination. All right. This is getting juicier and juicier as we jump into it. All right. So now I want to talk about the body, the womb, and the indigenous feminine portals, okay? Because we know that I talk to my Afro-Indigenous women on this podcast episode. So let's talk about our wombs, all right? Us womb holders and how powerful that is. I always talk about that as divine feminines activating codes inside of our DNA, our womb, which connects us to the ancestors that came before us and the ones that come after. So Afro-Indigenous traditions never separated the body from spirit. So, especially the womb, it's a listening vessel. Indigenous women across Africa, the Americas, and Caribbean were recognized as portals because their capacity to hold memory, lineage, and intuition. This is all divine feminine stuff we're talking here. This is all mitochondrial DNA. This is all sisters of the celestial womb, all right? Tying us into our divinity. We're tying us into the fact that our wombs are portals, literally, all right? So there's a reason that, and I'm going to have a doula on the podcast coming up. I've been wanting to have one for a while now. And so I'm going to have her come on and really dive deep into the magnificence of the womb and the whole birth process because you got to think about it when a grandbaby comes, when or let's say we lose an elder, right? An elder transitions into the next realm. Okay, so that's a transition, and now a baby is born. So we say an ancestor returned. All right, and an ancestor is coming through. So an ancestor is coming through the portal of the woman's womb into this dimension. Y'all, this is deep. This stuff is deep. So understand the power of your womb as indigenous women across the diaspora, all right? Because we carry that mitochondrial DNA that is responsible for all the people walking around here. All right? All the people, just think about that, all right? And Native American traditions honor the womb as the life carrier, vision holder, and the ancestral bridge, like I just described. Afro Caribbean traditions echo this through priestess lineages, womb based initiation, and embodied spiritual authority. Meditation drops us back into the body so the body can remember. All right. So that's also a very important part of it. So it's important to also understand that when you're doing your meditation practice, once you start to dive deeper into it and grow and expand in it, you're going to be tapping into different variations of this. It's not like you're going to experience all of this in one sitting. You may, like, I'll give an example for, you may actually tap into just really, tuning into your body. You may tap into learning how to ground and be grounded. You may tap into traveling to multiple dimensions. You may tap into the breath. You may tap into really being able to clear the channel and hear your spirit guides and your ancestors. Okay, it's a practice, and you're going to develop it and you're going to hone it over time. And most important, it's an initiation. Okay, so you're being initiated into the spirit realm. The spirit realm is saying, can we trust her? Like, is she going to be safe with this power? You know, can we trust her or him? So yeah, so that's what's going on. So I just want you to understand that too. It's not one of these things like, that's why I said some of these people on social media lying. So simple as that. The experiences that I've been having lately, I'm like, okay, people lying because they make it seem like that you could just get this and you can begin to lift out of your body and start astral traveling, and you could do it overnight just because you drank some blue lotus tea. And I'm like, y'all need to stop. This is why they probably like, some of y'all messy, y'all can't come through this portal, because they realize that, there has to be a certain level of discipline. You have to be disciplined to want to do this. And for some people, this may not even be about you. This may not even be something that you're interested in. This may not be something that you're called to do. So just understand that that's okay as well. But if it is, it's going to require some discipline. It's going to require some what? Uh-oh, I'm going to say it. Doing the work. But at least with this work, it's not painful like shadow work. You know what I'm saying? At least it just takes some discipline and some practice. And then over time, you formulate this habit. And once you start having these experiences, you like want to keep doing it. So yeah, very important and powerful. If you have a womb and an indigenous feminine portal, okay, that's what that is. Now I want to move on to ancestors, telepathy, and the cosmic lineage. All right, telepathy is not new. Once again, we just have a word to understand it, and we have to use the English language. For those of us that's the only language that we speak, that when colonization happened, they gave everybody that language and took away the indigenous, and some indigenous people still held on to their languages, but particularly for those of us Afro-Indigenous in the Americas, a lot of us, English is the only thing that we speak. So we have to use some of these words as a way of understanding what was already inside of our DNA, and a way of understanding what lies inside of our in the blood. So telepathy ain't new. Like, simple as that. I did a TikTok video talking about some of y'all are mediums and don't even know it because you're already having telepathic communications with your ancestors. Okay. It's just that this is what you do. You're having telepathic relationships and communication with your spirit guides, your higher self, right? You're already speaking and having these dialogues. All right. So telepathy is definitely something that our ancestors were doing. And I know that my ancestors been doing it for a minute, okay, since I was a little girl, and I can remember that. So telepathy is ancestral, and across the indigenous cultures, the ancestors communicated not only through telepathy, like I just described, audio, but they speak through dreams. They also speak through sensations. They speak through knowing, and they speak through symbols as well. So I talked about that in the how to activate your five spiritual gifts episode. That one was a while back. But yeah, so there's many different ways that our ancestors communicate to us, and this is why, like, being at the beginning stage of meditation and learning how to quiet the mind and the body is very important. See, like I said, there's layers to this. You can't just jump into astral traveling without doing that, okay? Because you have to understand and know the sensations, and you have to kind of practice it, and you have to start using it throughout your day-to-day walk, really activating these spiritual gifts, depending on where you are. So, and your ancestors will be communicating with you in many different ways. Some people may not hear them yet, but you may be feeling them. You may not hear them yet, but you may be really having these dreams that are vivid. You may not be feeling them yet, but you're having these visions of experiences and places that you've never been before. So paying attention to that is going to be very helpful. And in order to do that, that's when you have to start regulating that nervous system. You got to start to meditate. That's when the kind of beginning phases of meditation, which never gets old, by the way, is very important. Okay. Because you're going to have to do that first, and before you could kind of get into a state of trance, because then if you don't do that, how will you know if trance is not good or bad? Like, how will you know that this feels off or this is right? So there's levels to it. Like I said, regulating the nervous system, it activates and expands your spiritual gifts. Your intuition expands your spiritual discernment, your connection with your ancestors. All of these things help to safely guide you on your journey before you jump into opening portals and carrying on. I don't care what they say out there on those internet streets. Um, so let's see. I lost my place here. Oh yeah, ancestor communication is not mystical. It isn't. It's normal. When the body is regulated and the mind is quiet, meditation clears the static. So you'll notice that too in your practice. Things will get clearer. You'll hear things more. You'll trust things more. This is also how cosmic lineage becomes accessible. This is very important because I talk about that all the time, to connecting with your bloodline ancestors first. Why? Because they're going to help to safely guide you on your journey. And this is a prime example of that with meditation. They're going to help you with all of these foundational, fundamental things first. And once you start to raise your frequency and your vibration and elevate to a certain level, now your cosmic family is looking like, oh, look, check her out. Maybe she can hear us. You know what I'm saying? The channel's clear, because our bloodline ancestors have helped us with this up until a certain point. So they can also communicate with you as well. And these are going to be ancestors that you've never known, or not in this lifetime, but your soul probably knows them, so that's very, very important as well. And many Afro-Indigenous traditions understood that the stars were also our relatives. Okay, now we're definitely going to be talking about that in this class on Wednesday, the 21st. So if you're interested in going deeper into our connection, our ancestral technology, and how that connects us not only to our bloodline, but to our cosmic lineage. We start getting into that whole science versus spirituality and how those two integrate and merge together. Definitely, you want to check out that description and sign up for that class, because we're going deep into a lot of that stuff over there. So yeah, Afro-Indigenous traditions understood the stars as relatives, navigation, guidance, memory, and meditation prepares the body to receive those frequencies without fragmentation. So remember, I talked about fragmentation before, where you may be having visions, but it's just like little spurts and splots of, like, what was that? Like, you see something, but you don't know what it is. You didn't get to see it long enough. Those are kind of fragments. Those are your ancestors trying to communicate with you. Those are your ancestors trying to tap and get you back online. And a lot of times what they're trying to say is, hey, we want to get in touch with you. We got something to say. There's something important you need to know. And in order to be able to develop that strength and expand that gift, meditation, I'm telling you, it's the easiest thing you can get a hold to start expanding and raising your frequency and vibration. Do not sleep on it, y'all. All right, so now I want to move into Afro-Indigenous ancestors as relatives. Okay, so we talked about that a lot. We're talking about our bloodline ancestors, and we're kind of going backtracking here. So Afro-Indigenous is not metaphorical. Our ancestors are not abstract energies. They are relatives who walk this land. Just in case there's somebody listening who's like, "Oh no, that's demonic," our ancestors. My very first representative ancestor was my great grandmother. Okay, now you ain't gonna call my great grandmama no demon. Okay, wasn't nothing demonic about that woman at all. She was one of the most graceful, um, beautiful, calm spirited people that I've ever met on the planet to this day. All right, she was sophisticated. She was a classy lady. I never heard her yell. Now maybe she did when she was younger, but I never did. Okay, and I just loved her energy and being around her. Now, that was my first representative ancestor. All right. And then I moved into some other ones until I expanded and started moving into cosmic ancestors and lineages and spirit guides as well. That I resonated, my frequency, my soul knew them and they felt familiar. All right. So just understand that our ancestors are our relatives, our bloodline ancestors first. All right. They're not these abstract energies. That's why I say connect with your bloodline ancestors first. For anybody that's a little nervous about any of this stuff, like you should not be nervous about your grandmother. And make sure you're choosing people that you trust, that you knew, that you trust, and not try to shoot so far out. Because once again, like I said, they're going to guide you. All right, based on where you're at and where you're ready to go. So, meditation is how we sit with them as well when we're starting out that practice of connecting with our ancestors. This is going to be how you're able to listen, how you're able to remember, and not reaching up, not escaping, but tuning in. All right, so you can start to hear. And I'm glad we talked about that because a lot of times people always talk about how do I connect with my ancestors? How do I, you know what? Meditate. Like seriously, they'd probably be mad if I told them that, but it's true. If you constantly sitting there thinking that they're so far away from you, then you're gonna always be seeking to serve. They could be right there, like screaming in your ear. You can't hear because you got so much mind chatter going on, and you so anxious, and you can't focus, and your nervous system is dysregulated. They could be literally trying to say all kind of stuff to you, and all kinds of signs, symbols, visions, dreams, and you're just not catching any of that stuff. So meditation is going to be a great way to start to tune into your inner world, to start to clear that static up so that your channel becomes clear. I talk about myself being a channel. Really, a lot of people have the ability to be a channel. It's just that I've activated certain things to a certain level. My ancestors and spirit guides trust me to do certain things because they know that I'll be responsible with it. And let me tell you something, and I'm not saying this to say I'm better than anybody. It was 22 years. Okay. 22 years. Wasn't no overnight over here. Okay. It wasn't no, let's just jump into it. I had to go through, and I had to go through a tremendous amount of healing, because that was my journey. All right. Not necessarily everybody else's, but I'm just saying it's not a quick fix. But it is a easy to start practice, and we can start wherever you are. You can start as simple as we did at the beginning of this episode, which is let me just take a deep breath. Like I said, let me just tune into my body. Take a deep breath and stop. Notice where you are right now and how you feeling right now. Okay. We don't have to make it so big and so great. And that is a beginning practice, and to start to tune in more frequently about what's going on right now. Where am I at? How am I feeling? And then start to develop some sort of a practice where you're able to be quiet. And if you live around a lot of people and it's one of those things where it's like, well, I don't really have the ability to, then get in your car, find a way, go to the park. You know what I'm saying? If you really, really want to do this, you will definitely find a way, and your ancestors are going to help you find a way. And that's a fact. Okay. So, I yapped enough, but not too much this time. All right. So hopefully you guys got something out of that. I'm just going to kind of recap everything that we talked about. We talked about the difference, what meditation actually is, all right? And we talked about the difference between the Western New Age side of things, and we talked about coming from an Afro-Indigenous perspective. And as you can see, the Western New Age side is not wrong, but what it is a very small percentage of our ancestral technology, all right? So this is what they understand because that's what they have borrowed from other indigenous cultures. But if we start to tap into using the same stuff that we've always been using anyway, and start there, then we start to tap into a much deeper experience of meditation, all right? Because that's what's encoded inside of a lot of us as indigenous people, all right? So we talked about that. We talked about the nervous system regulation and why that's so important, because that it's important to clear the channel. We talked about meditation as a portal across worlds, about the fact that you could be multidimensional without leaving the body, and we're talking about being in an awakened state and not a dream state. But there's some things that come before that. We also talked about that. We talked about the body, the womb, and the indigenous feminine portals. We talked about the womb being a portal and a bridge between the ancestral realm. We talked about womb based initiations and embodied spiritual authority, really tapping into the divine feminine side of meditation and the importance of the womb. We also talked about ancestors, telepathy, and the cosmic lineage, how to get that channel clear to a certain point. And then last but not least, we talked about our Afro-Indigenous ancestors as relatives, okay? Not demonic, but your grandmama and your uncle and whomever it is that is a loved one for you, all right? So hopefully you guys got some value out of that. I'm going to say it one more time. If you this resonated with you, especially if you made it all the way to the end of this episode, definitely come and join us on January the 21st, Wednesday at 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern, when we go over science versus spirituality in the master class. And we're going to be talking about a lot of the ancestral technologies and that our ancestors use, not just meditation, but a lot of different things that is encoded in our DNA that we're going to start tapping into, remembering those things, reclaiming those things for ourselves. As well as I'll make sure that I have down in the description access to the meditations that are on my website as well, but also to the Insight Timer. If you want to start your practice, those are great places. I'm not blowing your mind on these things, okay? So like on Insight Timer, it's a perfect like, okay, I want to start meditating, but I don't know where and how. I think I've got one that's 8 minutes on there, and maybe like 10 and 15. And then I have an ancestral remembrance for Black women that's on there that's about 28 minutes. So, take your time with this stuff, build your practice. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, I always appreciate those. So go ahead and drop those down in the comments section. And that is it, y'all. Until the next episode.